Dome Theory, new edition, right off of game 2. We got some reaction here from Sam Esfandiari with us from the Light Years pod, covering the Warriors with his man Andy. And man, 2 games in these NBA Finals couldn't have swung in more polar opposite directions in each one. And we're going to try to figure out which one's more emblematic of which way this series is going to go here, Sam. Game 1, just a shooting explosion for Boston. They carried over a little bit into that first quarter. I think Matt Moore tweeted out that the Celtics were 8 of 13 on heavily contested threes to start this game. And the Warriors effectively shut it off in the second there with Draymond Green getting out on the perimeter, switching on to some Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum matchups. And we can get into his antics too, but I kind of want to get into just the schematic impact that he had on this game because it felt enormous, just some of the stuff he did defensively.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the honest answer of which game is more emblematic of the series, I think it's both. I think they're evenly matched. I think we're going to see shooting swings where it feels like they can't miss. I mean, Boston literally couldn't miss for like 3 quarters in a row there. And then we're going to see stretches where, because both teams have the capability of really turning it up defensively, we're going to see stretches where it gets really ugly. But I think my broad takeaway is 1-1 is fair. It's what it should be. And if I had to guess, I think it's probably gonna be 2-2 after the 2 games in Boston.
So your co-host there, Andy, was bummed that Andre Iguodala was pulled out before game 2. I was looking at it and saying, this is I was stunned he played in game 1 because he hadn't played since the Denver series, right?
Correct. He's been in and out and predominantly out of the lineup all year. So it's just been how it is. He's every bit of 38, you could say.
So Kerr sends him out for, I'd say, heavy minutes for his part in game 1 there. I don't know if to chase Tatum or just, have a disruptive guy out there. And I'm like, all right, if this is 2020, this is working. Because I remember Iguodala gave the Celtics fits in the 2020 East Finals. But it wasn't working in that game. And that was allowing Rob to ignore him and do some stuff defensively. Gary Payton, I'm not going to say he swung the series, which is some headlines out there people are writing. But he feels important in this series, just to have another guy who can switch, defend a variety of opponents. And I'm not sure everybody's been keen on what he's done for the Warriors this year, but there was a standing ovation. He has a great game in his return, 3 for 3. And I think most Warriors fans were really worried when he went down in that Memphis series. And obviously had an enormous impact coming back.
Yeah, I mean, you are correct. So just to speak to my co-host, Andy, I mean, Andre Iguodala has played big in so many big games for the Warriors. There's always going to be kind of the sentimental, can he have a throwback performance among segments of the fan base? And honestly, I can fall for that too. I know Steve Kerr, he just trusts him. He knows Andre doesn't make mistakes mentally. So that's why he got thrown out there. But my takeaway was the same as yours. He looked a little rusty, looked, quite frankly, probably too old to play against like Boston's athleticism. And getting GP2 back to essentially take the minutes that they gave to Iguodala in game 1 was massive, because you are correct. He's probably their best point of attack defender. I think he's up there with the best guards in the NBA at kind of ball pressure. You can put him up there with Marcus Smart and who else? Alex Caruso and some of these guys who are really good at kind of pressuring the ball. And he just gives the Warriors another defensive wing, which, as you know, it's like you're not going to be able to compete with Boston if you don't have multiple bodies to throw at Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and just the myriad of options they have scoring from the wing. I was surprised how well he played, because hairline fracture in his shooting elbow, like, you just don't know how that's going to impact someone. Like, shooting form is the obvious one, but like, are you willing to play through contact if you have a fracture in your elbow? Like, human nature says, like, someone touches it, you're going to shy up. And he didn't do that. He played the same way he's played all season, which is, kind of why he went from a camp invite with a non-guarantee to kind of in the main rotation by mid-season, because he played so well.
Yeah, and it's startling. He got signed right before the season, right? Like days before.
Yeah,
They
and he
picked
was
him
on
up
a
there.
he was on a non-guarantee until January. So in theory, the Warriors could have waived him at any time up until January. If they like saw someone in free agency that they thought was a more attractive fit for the roster. And he played so well, like waiving him's not it was never in the cards. Now it's like, can they re-sign him? Like, do they
Yeah.
have the means to keep him in free agency? He's been really kind of like a revelation for him.
Yeah, you see some of those lists, and he's one of the top guys on there. And I remember I thought he would have fit in with the Celtics too. He would have been
Mhm.
one of those guys that's just switchable, versatile, one of the best defenders. I think he already had that pedigree coming into the
Yeah.
offseason, and it was just zero offensively, right? That's what held him back and kept teams away for a little while there through some G League stints and the Wizards last year. So, uh, massive revelation for the Warriors here. He was incredible in that last game. Uh, some of the other guys, Jordan Poole gets going late. Klay Thompson struggles again in this game. And Steph's been Steph for the brunt of 2 games here and broke the
Mhm.
Celtics defense in ways we really haven't seen this postseason. One of my
Yeah.
things coming into this series is that teams can't build the leads. These leads on the Celtics. I think the biggest lead the Celtics had been under was 26 against the Heat, 17 before that. And the Warriors get it up to 29 in this game by the time the fourth quarter gets rolling there. And what do you think was just the biggest thing that shifted there in the third quarter?
I think the Warriors kind of got back to their identity, which is it's Steph, Draymond, and versatility around them. So I think through the first game and a half, they weren't sure which players were the best to put around Steph and Draymond. Um, Obviously, Wiggins was one of those players who just a steady two-way wing at this point. But Clay had been struggling. There's no way around it. Through 2 games, Clay's been subpar. He looks every bit someone who's had 2 terrible leg injuries because it feels like the athleticism of Boston's a little too much for him right now. Jordan Poole was awful in game 1, and defensively, he's gonna be difficult for the Warriors to play against Boston for heavy stretches. Um, but then they figured out that GP2, Wiggins, Otto Porter lineup gave them 3 versatile, switchable guys who can hit just enough shots. That was really the key to it. Also, it's like GP2 hit a corner 3, Wiggins hits his open shots. Otto Porter, his jump shot's been up and down, but like when he's on, he's on. Hit a shot.
That one to match Tatum, it got to 6, and
Yeah,
he put it back to 9. That was probably the biggest shot of the game, I thought.
yeah, and that's I really think where it was. It was, it's everything with the Warriors is about Steph and Draymond. Their offense is based off of basically like how much Steph Curry freaks out defenses. And then Draymond quarterbacks the defense. So it's just about finding the right guys to go around them. And they whether they stumbled into it or it was just like the right rotation at the right time, it feels like that lineup clicked and it's the finals. You can't just give Clay, 3 games to figure it out because if you're down 0-3, what's the point, right? So
Yeah, and I'm sure that I don't know what you're calling it. What's the new death lineup? Do you have a name for it?
I don't even know if that'll be the lineup that works in the next game. I think Steve Kerr and the Warriors staff are kind of like, we're just gonna have to we have a lot of versatility and we're just gonna have to mix and match around Steph and Draymond in general.
Yeah,
Maybe next game they need to play bigger more. Maybe Looney's the guy next game that gets like kind of the extended minutes and helps them out. You don't know, but it does seem like they've been doing a really good job at kind of identifying who's going and getting them in that game instead of being like kind of the old Dynasty Warriors who it was like you knew the 5-man lineup they were going to go to no matter what.
yeah, and I think Looney's already had an impact on the series. Not one of the more
Mhm.
sizable ones so far, but just as a release valve on some of these possessions where Steph gets
Yeah.
swallowed up in the lane and there's dump off opportunities. He's been great, and he's almost doing what Robert Williams would normally be doing for the Celtics in circumstances where he'd be healthy. And he has a good game 1, Rob. That is game
Yeah.
2. This is what's concerning for Boston, I think, because my X factor coming in was probably Rob just because he steals off the paint. He
Mhm.
completely cuts off those opportunities from the Warriors, and you saw that in game 1 with 4 blocks, just complete
Some
deterrence
some
in
of
the
those some of
lane.
those blocks were super demoralizing too. The one he had on Wiggins in transition, I was like, oh wow. Like
Oh, the
that's the type
chase
of
down, yeah.
yeah, that's the type of thing where you just like, you kind of you put your legs on your shorts afterwards, like, damn, what do I do?
And this was my thing coming into this series. If Rob's healthy, I'm picking the Celtics going away, just because I think he's such a matchup breaker there in a variety of matchups, but this one especially against a smaller Warriors team. Putbacks, offensive rebounds in general, the general size he brings to the floor, not to mention the defensive deterrence. But game two, some of these games through these runs, this run over the past couple of rounds here, he's just been a shell of himself, and it's sort of a day-to-day thing. And you worry as the series goes on, even with the gap days, that if he's not himself, this series completely changes. Because you talk about the Warriors searching for lineups. If the Celtics don't have Rob, it's do you go to Grant, who hasn't done much of anything in this series so far? And Pritchard had that nice run in the fourth quarter, but it doesn't feel like Ime really trusts him for extended runs. Not to mention the fact that he's just not a 3-guard kind of coach, it seems. Even in a smaller matchup like this one against the Warriors here, he might get to that, but I just don't know what the lineup is for Boston if Rob's not in it. And Ime almost hesitated to get away from Rob, even when it looked like he was starting to crumble in that third quarter. And that was probably one of the things that swung this game too, is that little sequence at the start of the third where he drops a rebound out of bounds. I think that led to a Warriors 3. He gets that block on Wiggins, but sort of comes up hobbling, and just play after play there. I think it reached a point where he fell on the baseline and just took a few minutes getting up there. So I don't know what to expect from Rob game to game. I think you saw the impact in game one. Game two, he's just not all there. And I know these series come down to stars, but that's one of the glue guys, X factors that could really swing this thing on the Boston side. And you just don't know what you're going to get.
And I don't know if the Celtics can continue can play Daniel Tice more either,
That's
because
two.
he
Yeah.
was the Warriors. Boston came out incredibly hot to start game two. Tice's minutes were kind of where the Warriors clawed back into the game. They had a 1-point lead at the end of the first quarter. If you watch the first quarter, you would have thought Boston had a sizable lead. And it's really because like Steph kind of picked on Pritchard and Daniel Tice at the end of the first quarter just to like close the gap. If I'm going into like game two, I'm looking at Boston. I'm going, they might just have a 7-man rotation. It might just be the starters plus Grant Williams and Derek White, and they might just have to ride with that. Because Pritchard and Theis were just kind of an issue. The Warriors were able to pick on them.
Yeah. And Smart, Horford, White, some of those guys that just dropped an avalanche of shooting on the Warriors in game one, all shut
Right.
off in this one. Do you think that was the Warriors adjusting and saying, all right, we're actually going to get out on these guys and cut off those open looks? I know Smart hit a few contested ones, and White had that crazy one over Curry that I think pretty much shut down game one, but Horford especially completely shut out of this game.
I think it's 50-50. Some of it's always going to be shooting variance. There's always going to be a level of that, but there's also, I thought the Warriors kind of played soft in game one. If I'm being perfectly honest, like
Or
they,
deferential, I thought.
I think any way you want to put it, I think Boston's athleticism caught them off guard because they seem to step slow on everything.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen. Boston's a more athletic team. Like, that's just a factual statement. And I think they thought they could dare some guys to shoot, and they were just reminded, like, guys, they're NBA players. If you leave them open, they'll hit them. Al Horford can shoot, like, yeah, can he shoot like Steph Curry? No, but if he gets time to like sit and release a shot, it's a good shot,
It was
right?
unreal what they were allowing him to do.
Yeah, so I think just that adjustment was probably a big one, and I mean, it starts with Draymond. He came out with the determination to get under Boston's skin early. Like any way you want to slice it, he knew what he was doing. He wanted to kind of send a message and then get his team kind of going, being like, we need to, I'll take a tech. But we need to make them feel us, I guess is the best way to put it, because I think that was honestly why they lost game one. I think Boston's too good that if you just play like kind of like a regular season intensity defense on them, they're going to start hitting shots on you.
I saw it too. Yeah, the game wasn't in a good spot for the Warriors early. The Celtics are still swinging the ball. Brown's getting going. They're building that marginal lead there. I think it got as big as 9. And Green, I think just at the start of the second quarter, puts his chest into Tatum on that play,
Yeah.
just keeps getting into him, and Tatum kind of slaps him away and draws a foul there. And the string of plays throughout, whether it was his spatting with Grant, he laid on Horford after he stopped him in the post for just a moment too long. By the way, I don't know where Horford post-ups came from, but that was not a good idea. And the big play that
And it
everyone's
did
talking
feel like
about today.
I do feel like the Warriors kind of baited that one. So one thing they
Yes.
did a little bit was cross match Clay onto Horford.
Yeah.
One, get Clay off of Jaylen Brown, which he had major issues with in game one. Two, I'm sure it'll be something they talk about, but like anytime Horford's posting up, that's a win for the Warriors. That's even if he scores on it, like it's just a less dangerous play than the ball in Jason Tatum's hand driving and kicking. So
Yeah, and that hasn't been a thing for Horford really since his last Boston stint. Like he has steadily gotten worse around the basket to the point this year where he's exclusively been a pick and pop
jump
guy.
shooter. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not his game. I don't know why they got to that, but did it about 3 times in this game. It didn't work well. But Draymond, after stopping him on one of those, lays on him just a little bit longer. Al didn't really respond, but Jalen did on that play in the second quarter where Green fouls him on the 3-point shot. Kind of has his legs on top of him. I'm sure just, a little extra moment there, getting up, taking his time, a lot of the little things you talk about there. And this is what frustrates me about game one. I'm going to go down this road. I am. If you pick up the first tech, you talked about it. Green was going to come in, set the tone physically, pick up that first one. Boom. All right, there you go. That's the point of a first tech. You get your little warning, and you got to be careful the rest of the way because you got that warning. So now there's a second dust up there. I feel like every time there's a dust up, it's double text. And Steve Javi was even talking about it on the broadcast. He's like, oh, one tech, we're going to be more cautious about giving a second one. And that just doesn't make sense to me. I feel like it's the opposite. If you have the first, you have to be careful as the player because if you pick up a double tech dusting up with a guy, you're gone, even if it's not warranted of rejection. And listen, I understand it's the finals, major player. You don't want to decide the game as the refs there, but that's on Draymond to me. Like you get into a dust up there, that's on you, and you're out of there. And I don't know why they didn't eject him.
I understand the logic of because I agree with you. Like all you really want is consistency. Or like a foul shouldn't be a foul depending on situation. A foul's a foul, right? Like you either did it or you didn't do it, right? So if it's a tech with 0 techs, then it should be a tech with 1 tech, right? Like I understand that logic, but on the other hand, I am someone who's in favor of just less officiating, sorry about to sneeze, less just kind of calling fouls. Like if you're going to err on one side, err on the side of not calling the foul. And I do think that, kind of Jaylen Brown taking the bait a little bit there and that whole thing makes it easy for the refs to be like, we're just going to let him walk away and call it that way. So, but I can, I'm not going to like lie here. Like I can understand Boston fans feeling a certain way about it because if I was on the flip side of it, I'd probably feel a certain way about it too.
Yeah. And listen, you got to go on winning that second half. The third quarter was a disaster. But again, like I think that situation's cut and dry. And I don't
I
know. They
do
just
think
decide not to.
what do you think of this? Because I think Draymond, look, the whistle was favorable to the Warriors early. No doubt about it. Like they were, and I think Boston let that affect them a little bit. I think there was a
Oh, it
level
always
of what
does.
there was a level of like throw your hands in the air, roll your eyes, like, oh, see, they're not going to let the Warriors lose at home. And then they got mentally unengaged from the game, and that's where the Warriors run started in some ways.
Yeah.
Like I think Draymond, he walked the line, but he got the result he wanted, which was have them up in their feelings instead of focused on basketball.
Yeah, and there's multiple guys on the Celtics. Jalen's not normally one of them, but it felt like it affected him, 1 of 11 the rest of the way. Tatum, it's just an everlasting thing with him. I mean, Ime's thing all year has been breaking the habits, and the one that just won't go away with this group is when the officiating gets away from them, they let it affect their offense. They're hunting for calls. They're not getting back in transition. There was one play on one of the step threes where Tatum got kind of stripped around the basket and he's just standing there a moment too long. And that has led during this playoff run to multiple breakout scores the other way. And Tatum loved his game one. Game 2 was almost the opposite. He's raining threes, but doing nothing else effectively. And I don't know how much he worries you and the Warriors fans and everybody on that side, because obviously a major threat, but there's been games during this postseason where he just really hasn't had it. And I feel effectively through 2 games, passing aside in that first game, which I did give him credit for, he just hasn't rose up to the moment here yet.
Well, and I feel like that's what was frustrating about game one. He shot the ball poorly, but I don't think he felt uncomfortable at all. He got 13 assists and only 2 turnovers. And for me, the turnover column is probably going to decide the winner of every one of these games. Both these teams have the propensity to turn the ball over.
That
It's
second
like,
quarter in game 1 was a mess from the Warriors.
yeah, and the second quarter the third quarter for the Celtics, they were turning the ball over a lot there too. It's just always been a thing with both these teams. They love to get loose with the ball, try things maybe they shouldn't try, pass it where no one is. And I think that was kind of the big difference in game 2, because it's like Tatum, I would not be surprised if he scores 35 or 40 in game 3. Like, he's too good a scorer. He's missing shots he can make. But where the Warriors need to continually win this matchup is like, do what Miami did and force him to just make him uncomfortable and see if you can bait him into turnovers, because both him and Jaylen Brown will turn the ball over if you get aggressive with them.
He is Sam Esfandiari. I want to get your general thoughts on the Warriors just being back here, because again, they're getting that treatment like, oh, the run's continuing here. But it was a couple years off. Mini rebuild, bringing in Poole, Payton, these guys to restock the roster. It's the same core here. Russell Wiggins trade, big deal. A couple young guys on the underbelly of this roster that they're trying to use to extend this run. Kamingo, Wiseman, and the rest there. I was looking at this team mid-season, especially when Green was hurt, and saying, they got to consolidate here. Go all in on veterans. Go get a Turner. Go get a Sabonis as green insurance, and just this is your chance. But they stuck with it. They didn't do any moves, and they get back to the finals. Now, who knows if they win this series? I think I'm with you. This is a coin flip between these two teams, and I don't think the Warriors are necessarily set up to dominate the West again. But 2 years off and you're back on this stage, pretty big deal.
Yeah, and it's what Warrior fans thought would happen after KD left, because there's this just belief in the core. But then they went through injuries, and you're lying if you didn't have at least some doubt in your mind about, like, is it over? Can they still get back there? Steph is still Steph. He's still amazing, but Draymond at times has looked old with the injuries, and then everything Clay's gone through, and he's struggling in this series. But, like, in general, it's hard to look at his play since return in January and think anything but optimism, right? Um, it's, I mean, this team is, and who knows how many more years they have in them. They do have young players that they could flip at some point, right? Like, they do have, or that they could develop. So they do have a chance to kind of have a Spursy type second act here, where they're competing for the West and for the title for the next 3-4 years, which would be amazing longevity wise. But you never know how it's going to play out. I think the major thing you take from this is, like, this team is made to the fan base. Like, people will be talking about the Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson Warriors in the Bay Area for, like, the rest of my lifetime. It's like, you're a Boston guy. I know, like, the Patriots run is over. People will talk about, like, the Tom Brady Patriots in New England, like, probably until you're an old man and dying, like that.
Yeah.
That's like what this team will mean to this area. The only other team I can think of who meant something like that to this area was, like, the 1980s 49ers. So they've kind of really established themselves getting back here after everything they've been to as, like, an iconic team that defines a generation.
Yeah, not perfect parallel, but you get the Brady leaving aspect and Durant leaving. Somehow the series gets set with Green and Durant bickering about who got double teamed more in the past finals, and I don't know how much of a sore spot. Obviously, Durant leaving and his pettiness there is a given, but for the Warriors fans, how big of a deal is that still? The fact that Durant left and there's still that what if?
Not really, because
It was easy.
Steph was always their guy. No one wanted KD to leave. It was just kind of like, but the ability to get back without him kind of has you doubling down on like the original guy who got the whole thing started. You know, um, it's I don't really know how to explain it other than like, Steph Curry's the guy who was here when they were bad. He's the guy who they won the first title with, who built the whole thing up. KD came and took them to like a level that no one had ever seen before. And quite frankly, I don't think we'll ever see a team that's as good as the 2017 Warriors. Like the amount of like lucky breaks you have to get with like the cap and everything to fit that many players on one team, it's like a perfect confluence of events, right? You just generally don't see that. But to see them get back without him kind of reinforces the belief that they always had something special going on. And I think for at least the local fans, it feels a certain way.
He is Sam Esfandiari, as I said, on Twitter. Go check him out there. Go check out the Light Years podcast. Him and Andy. No one talks Warriors like them, and go follow them on Twitter. It's a unique brand. It's great. Love having guys like you on the other side that you can go back and forth with here. And there's going to be a fun series the rest of the way, as you said. Thanks for taking a few minutes.
Absolutely. Let's link up later in the series.